Yo, what's going on, boys? How you guys doing today? Welcome back to another Steam 2 video. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a new build for the Warlock that's all about suspending targets, spawning a bunch of threat lanes, and basically you spam every single strand ability. The new strand mods have pretty much supercharged every single strand build, and while a lot of people are focusing on threat lanes, today we're looking at suspension. Suspension is still very strong, and so we're going to be trying to spam it just as much as we can. With our Tangles, with our melee, and even just our weapon kills are going to be suspending. It's going to be pretty crazy. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you do, remember to like and subscribe to the channel in case you guys aren't already for some more builds. And first we're going to start with that exotic piece of armor, since that's probably the most important thing to the build. And this is what we're going to be using today, and you know, I really did try, but some things are just not meant to be. Now this exotic is going to let our arcane needles emit a suspending detonation whenever we defeat something. So every time that we hit an enemy with a needle, they'll be marked, and if the needle defeats them or we defeat them afterwards with our weapon, they'll do a suspending burst around them, basically suspending everything around. It's also going to give our needles anti-barrier, so your needles themselves will be able to break shields, and they usually can break things in like one hit, so they're actually pretty good at breaking shields. And every time that we defeat suspended targets, we're going to be getting back some needle energy, so we can keep spamming our needles, so we can get more suspensions, so we can then use more needles. And this can be suspended from anything, so just as long as we're suspending targets, we're going to be getting lots of melee energy back with this. And with everything that we're going to be running on the build, we definitely always have needles, so we can constantly keep suspending targets. And the last thing that this exotic does is that you can actually stack the arcane needles on the same target. If you hit them with 3 needles, they'll do a huge suspending burst that not only suspends them, but also a huge amount of enemies around them. And it is probably like the biggest suspension burst just in the game. But it does require all 3 of your needles to actually trigger, so a lot of times you don't really want to use this just because of how expensive it actually is. Even if we're just constantly getting our needles back, using all 3 of them just right away, usually it's not worth it, but there is certain situations where it will be, and most of the time you're going to be using them on things like champions. So that is an option that you can use, but most of the time you're going to end up just marking somebody with your needle and using the suspension that way, so you can use it in multiple places instead of just one big burst. Now for the weapon that we're actually pairing this up with, you don't really have to go with a specific strand weapon. I think any of the strand primaries are going to be pretty good. I've used this with many different ones. I used Diad, the Quicksilver Storm, the Wish Keeper. I kind of messed around with all of them. I kind of ended up liking the Quicksilver the best just because I really like the weapon. But like I said, it doesn't really have to go with a specific exotic. But you want to go just all in on the suspension even more, you could even go with the Wish Keeper and add suspension to your weapon as well. I don't really think you need it. I think you have more than enough suspension. But if you want to just go full in, that is something you can do. Now for the subclass, you want to be on Pure Strand. I think it works better this way because of our aspects. Now for your abilities, for the Rift, you can go with either of them. I typically tend to like the Healing Rift since we don't have a lot of just built-in healing on Strand, so the Healing Rift is pretty good. And for your grenade, you want to go with the Shackle Grenade, and that's because it's going to be tied to one of our aspects. Now the very first aspect that we're going to be running is going to be Mind Spot Invocation, and this is going to let us consume our Shackle Grenade to enter Weaver's Trance. Weaver's Trance is going to last for 25 seconds, and for these 25 seconds, any final blows that you get will create a suspending detonation around them. So if there's one enemy and he's surrounded by a bunch of enemies, whenever you kill the first enemy, it is immediately going to suspend anything around them, meaning that you can get a lot of suspension kills, getting a bunch of melee energy, and also just suspending everything. And what's great about this is that it doesn't really have to be a specific type of kill. As long as you're getting final blows, you're constantly going to be suspending targets for those 25 seconds. This is an amazing thing, and you basically always want to have this on whenever you have your grenade. As soon as you see that you have your grenade, make sure you consume it, and you consume it the same way you always consume your grenades. And then after that, every single final blow is going to be suspending targets, giving you tons of energy, tons of orbs, and also just making everything a lot easier to kill because everything's suspended. Now our second aspect is going to be the Wanderer, and this is going to let our Tangles suspend targets. Whenever we throw or destroy a Tangle, it's going to do a suspending burst that's going to suspend everything in the area. And with the mods that we got this season that let our Tangles sever, as well as just let you make more of them a lot more often, this is going to be fantastic, especially since with this build, your Tangles are constantly going to be severing as well as suspending targets. So you're applying 2 debuffs immediately on an enemy when you hit them with one of those Tangle explosions. And if that wasn't already good enough, our Threatlings, whenever they get some kills, they'll also spawn some Tangles. And while we're not focusing like super heavily on Threatlings this time around, we are still going to be making a lot of them thanks to the mods and just us unraveling a bunch of targets. So we are actually going to be making lots and lots of Threatlings, even if that's not the main thing that we're doing. And every time that they damage some enemies, they're going to be applying debuffs, and whenever they get some kills, they'll spawn Tangles. So they're also going to be fitting pretty well into the build, even if it's just accidentally. Now moving on to the fragments, the first one we're going to have is going to be the Thread Warding, and this is going to give us Woven Mail whenever we pick up Orb's power. This is going to give you some more survivability, and with the amount of orbs we're going to be making, this is going to be something that's up a lot of time. This, plus one of the artifact mods, essentially makes it so we always have some Woven Mail. After that, we're going to have the Thread of Generation. Whenever we deal some damage, we generate grenade energy. This is really good, since our grenade is such a big part of the build. We always want to consume our grenades, so we want to get it back as quickly as possible. So just by doing damage, we're going to be helping ourselves just get the grenade back faster. After that, we're going to have the Thread of Wisdom. This will make it so every time we defeat suspended targets, we create Orbs of Power. And this actually lets us make a crazy amount of orbs, just because of the amount of targets we're suspending. And every time we defeat some of them, we're going to be making some orbs. So this is going to be really good, and it uses Persil really well with the build. And lastly, we're going to have the Thread of Fury. Whenever we damage targets with a Tangle, it's going to give us back melee energy. So this, plus our exotic, essentially make it so we always have a ton of melee energy, so we can just keep spamming our needles. At first, I wasn't wearing this fragment, and while the needle generation was good, with this it just makes it out of this world, and it pretty much guarantees that you always have like 1 or 2 needles just ready to go. And a lot of times, you get 3 of them back really quickly, and that means you can actually use that big suspending burst from the exotic. So it's definitely going to be really good, and it just means that you can spam needles even more. Now moving on to the artifacts, we're mostly going to be running the Strand ones, with a couple of other ones that are also going to be helping us. A very big one is going to be Unraveling Orbs, which is going to be giving our weapon Unraveling Rounds whenever we pick up a Tangle or an Orb of Power. So it gives us both ways of actually getting some Unraveling Rounds, which means the uptime we have on Unraveling Rounds is actually pretty crazy with this build. This mod is insane, and it makes any Strand weapon really good. Especially the boosted version, which makes your Strand weapons do even more damage against Strand debuff targets. And since we're going to be constantly putting Sever, Unravel, or Suspend on targets, we're just always going to be doing more damage. Another really good one is going to be Bioweave. This is going to let our Tangles sever, so it gives a very easy way of applying just AoE Sever on a bunch of enemies, and it also will reduce the Tangle cooldown every time that you pick one of them up. Meaning that as long as we keep picking up Tangles, we're just going to get a lot more of them, and we can just use them a lot more often. Elemental Siphon is also going to be really good, because we are using a Strand weapon, so we're going to be getting just a couple more of Strand drops, which is just Tangles. And whenever we pick up Tangles, we're also going to be getting some extra super energy, so we can build up our super a lot faster. Horse Shuttle is fantastic, and it's probably one of the most underrated mods this season, at least when it comes to the Strand ones, because every time that we damage any unravel targets, which is very easily since we have Unraveling Rounds in our weapon just all the time, it is going to spawn some Threatlings. And the Threatlings are great not only because they add a little extra damage, but because the boosted version of this perk, it's also going to let them sever. So whatever the Threatlings are hitting is going to be severing enemies, and thanks to the other mod that is going to give us Woven Mail for whenever we defeat severed targets, it just means that we're going to be spawning a bunch of these Woven Mail things that are going to be increasing the survivability on us and also our teammates. And the Threatlings are a nice addition to the build. And the last one that I want to talk about is True Shreds, and this is the one that's going to improve our survivability, because every time that we defeat some severed targets, we're going to create hotspots of Strand energy that give ourselves and our teammates Woven Mail. The main way that we usually create this is either with Threatlings when they randomly use severed things, or also whenever we hit something with our Tangles. Since it's an AoE Sever, it actually activates multiple of these, since you can actually have multiple of these like Strand hotspots at the same time. They don't last for a long time, but all you have to do is just walk through them and you get 10 seconds of Woven Mail. And there doesn't seem to be like a cooldown on them, so if you kill like 2 severed targets, you actually spawn 2 of them. And the boosted version makes it even better, because unraveling projectiles are going to be doing more damage, So overall, that'll just more damage, more act clear, and it just makes unraveling better. And it does even more damage to things that are severed. And again, since our Tangles are going to be doing AoE severing, it just means things are going to be taking more damage from those unraveling projectiles. Now these are the main mods that you want to go with, and then of course there's going to be a couple other mods depending on what you run. You want a linear, you can go particle construction, you went with a machine gun, you can go heavy ordnance. This one's really good because the increased regen, it is amazing. But the rest of the mods are going to be up to you. I pretty much just told you the ones that you actually need for the build. Everything else is fair game. And lastly, let's take a look at the mods that we have on this build. For the helmet, we're going to have Harmonic Siphon, as well as Heavy Ammo Scout and Heavy Ammo Finder, just so we can use our heavy a lot more often. For the gauntlets, we're mostly focusing on things that give us back energy whenever we use our melee ability, since we're going to be spamming our needles. So every time that we do some damage with them, we're going to be getting back a bit of grenade energy, as well as class ability energy. And the last one, I just went with a loader, just so I could reload both my machine gun and my auto rifle a little bit faster. For the chest piece is the easiest one. This pretty much is just the resistances, so make sure that you check the threat on whatever strike you're doing or GM you're doing, and change these accordingly. For the boots, we're going to have Absolution, since we're going to be making lots of orbs of power. Having this is going to be really good for just constantly getting our abilities back. And then Better Already plus Recuperation, so whenever we pick up some orbs, we heal, as well as start health regen. Now this is something I like to run Strand, just because we don't have a lot of like built-in health regen. So this just kind of helps us out, and it keeps us very healthy and just constantly healing and regenerating. And lastly, for the class item, we're going to have Reaper, so we can make even more orbs, as well as Bomber and Outreach. Pretty easy, just so we can get our abilities back faster. And with that, that's actually going to be the end of the build, boys. Now you guys pretty much have everything to take this into any strike and just start suspending everything. Like always, there's going to be a dim link in the description and also in the comments below if you guys want to check out this build. Another gameplay loop for this build is going to be pretty simple. You consume your grenade to activate Weaver Strands, and after that you start suspending a bunch of things. You use your needles as you see fit, either to like prime somebody up for a suspension, or to finish somebody off to trigger a suspension. You can't really go wrong with the needles. If you do it at the very beginning, at the very end, the result is still going to be the same, and is that whenever the enemy dies, it's going to trigger the suspension burst. And make sure that you spam your abilities, because you're going to be getting back really quickly. If you see any Tangles that you can pick them up and throw them immediately at enemies. Or if you see a Tangle in the middle of like a bunch of enemies, make sure that you shoot it so you can immediately suspend everything. The more suspensions you get, the more you can spam your melees, and the more you can spam your melees, the more suspensions you get. So you just kind of want to keep chaining them on each other. You do get your super back pretty quickly thanks to the mods, so make sure that you use it against some of those bigger enemies like champions and mini bosses. And that's gonna be pretty much it. It's a very simple build, so hopefully you guys enjoy it and hopefully it does help you. Now, it's not a super close range build like maybe some of the other ones we put out, but I think it's still really good. And if you like to sit back and just control all the ads, this is gonna be a build that you're gonna love. So hopefully you guys end up enjoying the build and giving it a try. And if you guys do, make sure you guys come back here and let me know what you thought of the build. Anyways, thank you for watching today, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, everyone. Have a rest of your day. Peace.